Bloodborne is a game that was developed by From Software in 2015, and it's what's called a Soulsborne game. Soulsborne games are action RPGs, and the unique style of storytelling is what helped develop it into its own subgenre of RPG. Soulsborne exclusively refers to games in this style developed by FromSoft, whereas Souls-like is the term for similar games made by other companies, some examples being Steel Rising or Lies of P. Both games were made based on the gameplay and storytelling style that Bloodborne helped develop, hence the Born in Soulsborne. However, no matter how influential games like Bloodborne have been for video game storytelling, it also has its flaws. Some of the stories in similar games are so convoluted that books have been written trying to explain it. So the question remains, is the storytelling in Bloodborne any good? And should anything be taken from it? Or is it just a confusing mess? Bloodborne is a gothic horror game that takes place in the city of Yharnam and the areas surrounding it. The stunning setting and art of the game is what originally drew me in and made me interested in it. The beautiful architecture and character/creature design is very dynamic and have a lot of meaning behind each detail. When I was finally able to play the game after years of wanting to, it lived up to my expectations perfectly. However, unlike most people, I didn't start out the game blind. I already knew a lot of context to the game's story. I can imagine how going in blind would be a tad confusing at the start, but you would eventually pick up most of what is happening. I have now played the game myself, watched many video essays about the story, and read a book about it, and I would still probably struggle to recount the complex story of this game, which leads me to the most important question. What about the storytelling in Bloodborne makes it so widely acclaimed by the players and critics alike? Well, it's actually more the lack of a clear story that lends to its popularity. Many story-oriented games have the player be a character with an already defined past and motivations, having them follow beats of the plot as objectives. For example, in Silent Hill 2, you play as James Sunderland, a man whose motivation is to set out and find his wife.
Mary. Could you really be in this town?
Even if you start a game not knowing anything about the character, you will figure them out as you play through the story. In contrast, the only thing the player knows about the character in Bloodborne is that they have arrived in Yharnam in search of pale blood.
Oh, yeah. Pale blood.
Which is never elaborated further on. The character does not even have a set appearance, being completely customizable by the player. The story is left open-ended. You're never given any objectives and are pretty much just dropped in and set loose in the world. The creator of Bloodborne, Hidetaka Miyazaki, had spoken to The Guardian for a rare interview about Bloodborne after its release. He spoke about the reasons why he had made the story the way it is. In the interview, Miyazaki talked about how when he was young, he would read all the time, although he wasn't actually reading, saying, "I found so much joy in those stories. It was a rich reading experience, even if I wasn't always reading." You see, Miyazaki wasn't properly taught how to read at a young age, and so he would fill in the story between the few words and sentences he could pick up. Much like a young Miyazaki, we have to fill in the story of the game with the little bits and pieces we are given. Depending on how much you're paying attention to your environment, item descriptions, or even the loading screens of the game impacts how much of the story you understand. For example, there's an entire side plot about vampire-type creatures called Vilebloods. There's a non-player character you can run into while exploring around Yharnam named Alfred.
You may call me Alfred, protege of Master Ligarius, hunter of vile bloods.
Later in the game, you get to an area called Canehurst Castle, where all the Vilebloods used to live, and is the current resident of Annalise, Queen of the Vilebloods. Before you can enter her room in the castle, you must kill a boss called Martyr Ligarius, who was an executioner who stayed at the castle to make sure Queen Annalise never got out and that no one gets in. If you had not spoken to Alfred earlier in the game, you would not know who either of these people were, what their significance was, or even that Vilebloods were vampires. If you had read the item description for the blood dregs that appeared on the loading screens, you would also know that the reason Vilebloods were being hunted by the executioners was because they would kill and drink the blood of hunters specifically for their special blood. While helping to write the story, along with the characters, can be immersive, it can also hurt the player's experience with the game, and also brings up the question I posed at the beginning. Is the storytelling in Bloodborne any good? Does having the player create the story make it a good story, or is it just a cop-out? Will it make the playthrough of the game less impactful if you don't find everything? These are all very valid questions to have, and what exactly does good mean anyways? Good is a subjective term. It can mean different things for different people. I chose to use the word for this very reason. Some people could find the storytelling in this to be impactful and therefore good in their eyes, whereas other people could see it as a lazy way to tell a story and therefore bad. The visual style of the game is one of the main reasons I like it so much, not exactly its story. Would I enjoy Bloodborne as much if not for the visuals of it? There's not really a way for me to know. The question about storytelling is important to raise because there should be intent and meaning in any story that you tell, whether it be a book, movie, or a game. If the player is the one making the story, what meaning could it possibly have if it changes depending on how much a player cares about the game? Maybe that is the meaning, or maybe the meaning lies more in the visuals of the game, and that tells the story more than the choices the player is making. Maybe the visuals of a large, ghostly, pale woman dressed in a white wedding gown bleeding from her stomach says more about the story than dialogue or text ever could. While looking at research materials for this project, I came across the Beyond the Words page on the library's site. It talks about how visual storytelling can be just as, if not more, effective than traditional word-based storytelling. So, should more games go with this approach to storytelling? Yes and no. A part of what makes Bloodborne so impactful is that it's not your typical story. It has a heavy emphasis on visuals and player choice rather than a linear plot. If every game did that, it would get old quick. Although visuals can tell a great story, it is tough to get perfect. Dark Souls, a game also made by FromSoft, has books fully devoted to explaining what's going on. Needing a second piece of literature to explain what you're trying to say lessens the impact of the original story, mainly because it shows just how many people completely miss the meaning of the narrative to the point you need a whole book. Bloodborne did a much better job at this in my opinion, which makes sense as it came later after having experimented with the style more. While there are videos and books about it, they are less about having to reiterate what the point is and more exploring what they interpreted the point as. The story in Bloodborne is good, but the specific style that Bloodborne has helped pioneer can be difficult to get right. In my opinion, aspects of it should be used as a way of showing rather than telling, instead of trying to replicate the style completely. At the end of the day, how you choose to use the word good is totally up to you, so give it a playthrough and see if it fits your definition.